This is Sean Porter. He is a probation officer who works at a corrections facility for young men. But unfortunately, no matter how hard this man works, these kids just keep finding ways to get in trouble. And oftentimes it wouldn't even get much better when they went back home. Because when he found out that this kid, Willie Weathers' cousin Roger, had just left the facility just to get run down and killed due to some gang violence, Sean Porter had finally realized that it was time to make a change.
Cousin, man.
I want you to play on this team, Willie.
Why?
Because I want you to live longer than your cousin.
So he would create an opportunity to start a football team. And he was about to give all of these young men a chance to prove that they could really be something in life. But before they can get to that, they had to start out with some practice. And Coach Porter really knew what to say to get these boys to lock in.
Get up, Evans! I bet there's a piece of chicken down there you go for, wouldn't you?
Hell yeah, Coach, I love chicken.
Get your ass down there, on my whistle, on my whistle!
But one thing that Coach Porter didn't know is that this kid Calvin Owens and Willie Weathers had some serious street beef.
I'll kill you right here, right now.
You see, these two are from rival gangs. And in practice, Calvin Owens was speaking absolutely crazy to Willie, saying stuff like, "My dad homies drink water before you do." But you see, the one thing about Willie is that he wasn't no punk. So the next time he saw Calvin, he ran right up to him. He said, "Wang!" Smacked that boy right in his face. He wasn't gonna have all that, you feel me? But nah, see, Coach Porter realized that he had to put a stop to all this right away. These two had a chance to become some of the best players on the team, and even better than that, they had a chance to become great men someday. So Coach Porter had worked to try to get these two to reconcile their differences, and after some time, this team was finally ready to play some football. But now that they're getting their gear, let's get into some player introductions. First up, we got Leon Hayes, quarterback, and he will be one of the leaders on offense throughout this season. Next up, we got Kenny Bates, wide receiver. This boy got mommy issues and drops the ball a lot, but we can fix the second part at least. Now we got Calvin Owens at linebacker, who was a gang member for the 95s, but he will be coming in as a 96 overall. Then they got Miguel Perez, who's going to be playing defensive back for them. Then there's Donald Madlock playing D-tackle, and he actually said he wanted to stay at the facility just to play football. They also had this kid, Junior Pallotta, who Coach Porter was not going to let on the team at first, but then one night he saw him out there pushing the sled with no pads on, just going ballistics. So Coach had just said, "All right, bro, you on a team." And he allowed him to come in and play some fullback. And last but certainly not least, we have Willie Weathers, a player who has no idea just how special of a future he has in football. But before this team gets into their first game, they're taking a look at the schedule, and they have some pretty interesting opponents coming down the line. It turns out that they're actually going to be playing against some other prisons and county jails. So it's definitely going to be an interesting season coming up, but now it's time for them to get into their first game of the year. And y'all may not know this, but they're actually playing against the Clemson Corrections Facility Institute of the YNs. And now known as the Kilpatrick Mustangs, Willie Weathers and Leon Hayes are ready to lead this team out on the field to try to come away with their first victory of the year. Now, to start their season off on the road, they were actually playing a lot better than most people expected. They came up with a safety on their opening defensive drive, prompting an early 2-point lead, and now their offense was coming out to show what they can do. And they were actually doing pretty good in the run game early on. But they realized that they were in a little bit of trouble when they first called a pass play, and everybody realized that Leon had never even thrown a pass before.
You ain't never thrown a pass in the real game, have you?
Nah, I played games. I played Madden.
What?
This ain't EA, homie.
A video game?
I controlled the quarterback. What?
Now, luckily for Leon, this actually is EA. And on this 3rd down and 9, he comes up with a pretty nice throw, but it just bounces off the receiver's shoulder. And this eventually led to Clemson Corrections Facility throwing a pass to the end zone for a touchdown. Now taking the early 7-2 lead, and it looks like they had some momentum going forward. Because throughout the rest of the first quarter, there were a lot of players on this offense that couldn't catch a cold. And at some point, it seemed like Willie Weathers was the only person coming up with some big plays. But even though he was making some big plays of his own, that Clemson defense was swarming. And they were making sure to talk their shit in between plays.
Afraid to get hit, boy? Don't like it, do ya? Wow!
By the end of the first quarter, this Mustang defense just watched as they were getting walked all over. Clemson Corrections Facility was pretty much just having their way with them. And that seemed to be pretty clear as they got in for another touchdown to extend their lead to 2 possessions. It wouldn't be until the very start of the second quarter where things would get going for this Mustang team, because their running game was leading them down towards the goal line, where on their 2nd down they handed the ball off to Willie Weathers, and he made his way outside before diving for the first touchdown of the year. This team had finally proved that they could score some points and keep up with their opponent, and they were hoping with momentum now on their side that they could keep it going in the second half. But it seems like Leon Hayes has other plans, because he is throwing a pick to start the second half. A play that ultimately led to the scramble out of the pocket by the Clemson quarterback, who somehow had the entire right side of the field wide open before getting in for another score. And at this point, this game was beginning to get out of reach, but the Mustangs were trying to fight back at the end of the fourth quarter, as Willie Weathers gets in for another receiving touchdown to make it a 2-possession game, But by the end of this one, even with Kenny Bates beating off the press and hauling in a reception over the top where he gets in for his first touchdown of the season, the Kilpatrick Mustangs would still go on to lose their first game of the year, 38-28 to the Clemson Corrections Facility Institute of the YNs, and after the game, man, Sean Porter watched as his team was in distraught. There wasn't a single player on this team that wanted to be a loser, and honestly, Sean knew that his team had a lot more talent. And deep down inside, he knew that his team had known it too. Because the following week, they all showed up to practice bright and early, and they let the coaches know just how locked in they truly were.
Like I told you, Coach. Tired of being losers.
So they're looking forward to going into the rest of the schedule, even though they realize that they don't even have a logo. Apparently, all of the money had actually gone into making their jerseys, but that was all good though, man. They were ready to get into their second game of the year. And as soon as they got to the field, they realized that they didn't even have the budget to put down some turf. So even though somebody may or may not have spent a lot of time working on that, it was all good because these boys were ready to play, and they proved it by coming up with a sack on third down. A big play early on that gets their offense out on the field, and Leon Hayes is making some nice passes to move his team. On the 2nd down and 10, Leon had thrown a great ball to the receiver on the right side, who was able to get around the defender and get in for the first touchdown of the game. The Mustangs take the lead 7-0, and it looks like that momentum's going to carry back over to defense. Because on 3rd and inches, this cornerback is coming up with the pick, a turnover that's going to bring this offense back out on the field and allow them to continue to build on the plays that they've been making, like the shot over the top to Junior Pallotta. And just a few plays later on 3rd and goal, they hand the ball off to Willie Weathers, who takes this ball around the edge for another touchdown on his season. A big play to close out the first quarter, but Willie wasn't even done yet, because right before half he got back down to the goal line where he was able to run across for another score. And that really seemed to set the tone for the team going forward, because by the end of this game, all of the momentum was on their side. So even when Leon Hayes was out there throwing another interception on his season, it didn't really seem to matter because the opponent couldn't score, and whenever the Mustangs would go back out on offense, Leon would make up for it with a pass just like this one. A completion that gets his team back in the end zone for another score, putting this game away and giving them their first victory of the season. The Mustangs had blown out their opponent 35-6. And Willie Weathers would go on to win Player of the Game for his performance as he scored 3 touchdowns. Now the next week, sadly, it looks like the Mustangs are getting some new recruits. They're getting a kid that could have went to a lot of big schools throughout the country, but instead he decided to do a drive-by and now he'll end up with the Mustangs. Now the trophy for the Best Player award is showing that Rikers Island might be a team that the Mustangs have to worry about later on. But for now, they just have to worry about coming away with the victory in their next game against United Texas East Penitentiary. Now to start this game off, the Mustangs' opponent was running the ball all over them, getting in for a score to take their early 7-0 lead. And honestly, it looked like it was about to get a lot worse. Because when the Mustangs go back on offense, Leon Hayes throws a pick while already in scoring position. And then on top of that, it didn't take long for United Texas East Penitentiary to get in the end zone for another score, coming up with a play that now makes this a 14-point ball game. And if things couldn't get any worse, man, this dude Kenny Bates was dropping passes like he had all season. Regardless though, Willie Weathers would drive his team downfield, getting in for a touchdown that would make this a one-possession game, and eventually the Mustangs would get the ball right back after only allowing a field goal. And with Leon Hayes starting to make some much better throws, this team wasn't having too hard of a time getting downfield. And it wouldn't be long before they were back in the end zone for another touchdown to make this a one-possession game. And in the second half, after still being down by one possession, Leon decides to take a shot deep to Kenny Bates, and he actually comes up with the catch, making a play that ends up putting the Mustangs in the lead after they convert the 2 points. And in a game where this Calvin Owens-led defense was starting to come up with some big stops, while the Mustang offense continued to find ways to put up points, by the end of this one it would begin to grow out of reach, and they had done enough to put this game away, as the Mustangs go on to win another game on their season 37-27. And Leon Hayes goes on to win Player of the Game with 3 touchdowns, 338 yards passing to go with it, and it's easily his best game of the year. But Willie Weathers had also done his thing by going for over 100 yards rushing. And shout out to Calvin Owens for leading the way on defense. Now these boys got a little nervous after the game when they noticed that there was a squad that had blown out the team that had beat them in the first game of the season. They had to worry about facing off against them in a couple weeks, but for now, they just had to focus on their next matchup against Santa Rita Jail. Now to start this game off, Kenny Bates is returning this kick, and he is actually finding a lane. He is taking this kick return past midfield, and he is bringing the Mustangs down to the 36-yard line. And it wouldn't be long before they would get down to the goal line, and Willie Weathers would walk right into the end zone for a touchdown. Things seemed to be going great for the Mustangs as they would find themselves up by 14-6 in the second quarter. But Leon Hayes would start making some plays that would put the Mustang lead in jeopardy. Because after throwing not just 1, but 2 interceptions, Santa Rita Jail had taken the lead 16-14 going into the fourth quarter. But luckily the Mustangs had Willie Weathers out here saying hey, and even stiff-arming people to the dirt as he picks up first downs. On 3rd down and 12, Leon made sure to get the ball to Willie, and he continued to be the guy to move the sticks for his team. He ended up bringing him down to the goal line where he dove across for the touchdown. A score that gave the Mustangs the lead with a little over a minute left and did enough to put this game away, as the Mustangs go on to finish this game off 21-16. And Willie Weathers goes on to win player of the game with 137 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. Leon Hayes had done okay too, but he got to get better at not throwing picks. Now the following week, unfortunately, the Mustangs get another recruit. This kid is coming to the Mustangs because he keeps walking around and punching people in the face for no reason. But it's too bad they don't got him going into their next game against the Allenville Mean Machine. Now to start this game off, Willie Weathers was actually running all over them. He picked up multiple first downs on this opening drive, leading the Mustangs down to the goal line, where on 2nd and goal he was able to cross over for the touchdown to make it a 7-point game. And the Mustangs were trying to make it a point to not let these old heads push him around. So Kelvin Owens was setting the tone on defense by saying "Shabaka," coming up with a big hit in the receiver, and then immediately after he starts checking his pockets. Now on defense they were able to come up with the stop and force the Mean Machine to punt. And once they got the ball back on offense, Leon Hayes was playing different. This dude was using his legs to extend plays, and on this play he would find a receiver deep downfield that puts the Mustangs at the 10-yard line, leading them to this 4th down and inches where Willie had pretty easily got in for a touchdown, putting this game at 14, and it didn't get any better for the Mean Machine from there. It turns out that the Mean Machine showed up drunk to this game because they thought that they can just beat up on these kids. But nah man, led by Willie Weathers, the Mustangs were putting belt to ass on the Mean Machine. At some point this game was 35-14, and Paul Crew was throwing another pick that would immediately put the Mustangs past midfield with a chance to put up some more points. And after Bug Wendo comes out and kicks a field goal to extend their lead further, the Mustangs had done enough to put this game away. The Mustangs go on to beat the Mean Machine 38-20, and Willie Weathers would go on to win player of the game as he scored 5 touchdowns. He got a season high in scoring that earns him the Southeastern Convict Player of the Week. Now sadly the Mustangs would keep getting recruits, and these two had got busted for robbing an elderly home of everybody's dentures so they can sell them on the black market. And it's crazy to think that this whole time Sean was visiting his mom in the hospital who was really sick. And he was doing this while coaching his young team of criminals into their biggest game of the year, as they were getting set to face off against Rikers Island. Now this game had started out great for the Mustangs as Willie Weathers was coming up with the catch, and on the first play of the game he was saying hey, skibidi-bop, excuse me, and picking up a big first down for his team. Now unfortunately on this opening drive they would actually get stopped at the goal line on 4th and inches. But after Rikers gets them down to the goal line in scoring position, they actually throw a pick, putting the Mustangs offense back out on the field and allowing them an opportunity to go downfield and score some points, which Junior Pilata would do with the touchdown to make the 6-0. Now this offense would continue to move downfield towards the end of the first half, as Kenny Bates was beating the defensive back and getting wide open over the top, eventually coming up with the catch on this 3rd down and 1, where he was able to bring it across the goal line for a touchdown, coming up with the score that would continue to set the tone for the Mustangs. And in the second half, after Kenny Bates continued to beat his man off the line of scrimmage and make some big plays deep over the top, he would eventually find himself gliding towards the end zone for another touchdown on his day. And with this score, Kenny had helped out enough to put an end to this game, as the Mustangs go on to blow out Rikers Island 35-14. And Kenny Bates goes on to win player of the game with over 200 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns, earning himself the right to become the 2nd player on his team to win a Southeastern Convict Player of the Week. Now unfortunately Willie Weathers had gotten injured in the game against Rikers, so the Mustangs were going to have to figure out a way to win without him in their next game against Folsom Prison. And early on it was not looking good for the Mustangs as the Folsom Prison would take a 7-0 lead. But with Leon Hayes staying strong in the pocket throughout this game, they were bound to have some success. He led them down to the goal line where on 1st and goal he rolls out and finds Kenny Bates for a touchdown, getting in for a score that would tie this game up. And later on in the first quarter, Leon would make a similar kind of play, rolling out to his right and finding a man open underneath who got it upfield for another score, this time making it 14-7. And after the defense had finally been able to come up with a stop, the return man had taken this kick and actually came up with a nice play. He brought the Mustangs past midfield to get him in scoring position, which they eventually did as Leon Hayes threw another touchdown to Kenny Bates. And it seemed like right here is where the floodgates would open, because by the end of this game, it was 35-14. And on this 1st down and goal, Leon was throwing another touchdown on the day, and they had definitely done enough to put an end to this game. The Mustangs go on to win this one 42-14, and Leon Hayes goes on to win another player of the game with this time 6 touchdowns, easily the best game of his career, and he didn't even have Willie Weathers to throw the ball to. Now taking a look at the season stats so far, a lot of the players on this team were actually playing pretty well. Leon just got to get his turnovers down, but Willie Weathers almost had 500 yards rushing already, and same thing with Kenny Bates as a receiver. But with Willie Weathers now finally off the injury list, he was ready to get into another game, as the Mustangs' next one would be against the Old Block County Jail. Now Old Block in this game would start out very well as they got down the field on this 3rd and 7 and got across the goal line for a touchdown, putting up the first points in this game as they go up by 7. But when the Mustangs got the ball, they did not want to back down by any means, because on this 4th down, they still decided to go for it, and Leon is just throwing it up to Willie Weathers, who comes up with the play, making a catch that brings his team deep into enemy territory and puts him inside the 5-yard line, where just a play later, the backup gets in for a touchdown to tie this game up. Now, as the Mustangs had actually taken the lead, it was now the O Block who was working hard to tie the game back up. And time again over the course of the next few quarters, they got downfield to get this game tied at 21. But by the end of the 3rd quarter, the Kilpatrick Mustangs were determined to move ahead. And with Junior Pilata now trucking over multiple defenders, they would have some momentum going into the 4th quarter. But after this 3rd and 12 where Leon Hayes gets hit and throws a pick, it's now not really looking too good for the Gridiron Gang. Luckily though, this defense had come up with a stop on 3rd down to force a field goal, allowing the Mustangs a chance to go down the field and score a touchdown to win. And with Leon Hayes putting his body on the line, it looked like they might have a chance, because he got them to a 1st down and goal where a receiver had slipped past the DB on the right side, and he throws a dime over the top for a touchdown. A score to Miguel Perez with 30 seconds left that ultimately does enough to put this game away, as Kilpatrick goes on to close this game out 28-24. And this was actually a game where immediately after, the whole team surprised Coach Porter in the locker room with some flowers. They also gave him a card too so they can give it to his mom, because they were all really hoping that she gets better soon so she could watch them play. But for now, they just had to keep winning so that maybe she could watch them in the playoffs. So now they were just focused on coming away with another win in their next game against the Kentucky Institute Penitentiary of Technology. Now to start this game off, things were going great for the Mustangs. Calvin Owens was saying, "Wang," coming up with one of his first interceptions of the season and putting this offense in a great position to score some points. Now by the end of the game, the Mustangs were losing 10-13, but Willie Weathers was getting across the goal line for a score to take the lead. And it wouldn't be long after that where the Mustangs got the ball right back. And on 4th down and 26, the Mustangs need a 1st down to close this game out. And for whatever reason, Sean Porter had trusted his offense that much, but Leon Hayes was showing exactly why he should, as he makes a throw that gives his team a 1st down and puts this game away, as the Mustangs would go on to win this one 17-13. And Kenny Bates wins player of the game with over 100 yards and 1 touchdown. And it would actually be by the end of this game where Calvin Owens and Willie Weathers would finally put their differences aside, as they both realized that there was more to life than gangbanging. And together they continued to lead this team throughout their season, as in their next game they were trying to come away with another victory against the Wake Forest County Prison. And for one of the first times all season, Leon Hayes is scrambling up the middle, and he's actually able to dive across the goal line for a touchdown, putting up the first points on the board in this game. But it seems like the Mustangs were just getting started, because on the 2nd and 8 after Willie Weathers sneaks out of the backfield, Leon is finding him wide open over the top for a touchdown. A score that puts his team up 21-0 and gives the Mustang a ton of momentum going forward. Well, at least until the 4th quarter where their opponent had scored another touchdown on the game and finally taken the lead back, leading Leon Hayes to have to orchestrate a game-winning touchdown drive. And with less than 10 seconds left, the snap goes directly to Willie, and he is fighting his way across the goal line for a score to take the lead and help his team win another game, as the Mustangs are able to come away with a victory by 1 point. And Willie Weathers goes on to win player of the game with 62 yards and 3 touchdowns. And that right there was great news. But unfortunately, the following week, Coach Porter's mom would sadly pass away. Now, thankfully, she was able to read the letter and get the flowers that the boys had got for her. But all this did was just motivate the boys to play better, as they were only a few weeks away from the playoffs. So now the Mustangs were focused on coming away with a victory against the only real school on their schedule, Eastern State University. Now, this game was looking like it might go like any other game for the Mustangs. At least that was until one of the players on the other team had recognized Leon Hayes.
Hey, pay attention when I'm talking to you, nigga.
What?
Oh, I know you, motherfucker. You the one got my baby sister pregnant. Ain't seen you around lately. Where you been, huh?
Now, Leon didn't know nothing about that man's baby sister, but he did know that he threw a pick right to him. Alvin Mack, one of the nation's best linebackers, is coming up with an interception. And luckily for the Mustangs, ESU doesn't have Darnell Jefferson out there, who was also one of the nation's best running backs. Because if they did have him, I'm sure the Mustangs wouldn't have got a stop on 3rd down. Now on defense, unfortunately, Leon Hayes was still being terrorized by ESU, as he gets hit in this play that ends up as a pick, and the D tackle is taking it all the way back to the crib for a touchdown, putting this game at 10-0 early on. But you see, the Mustangs were not about to sit around and take that. So on this play, Leon pitches the ball to Willie, and he's getting around the edge and making his way upfield before diving across the goal line for a touchdown, getting in for a score to make this a 3-point game, and all the momentum seems to be switching towards the Mustangs after they come out on defense, and Heisman candidate Joe Kane throws a pick, giving the ball right back to the Mustangs, and even though they didn't do anything with it immediately, they would eventually get down to the goal line where Willie Weathers makes it across for a touchdown, taking the 1-point lead in the process. Now, unfortunately, it did not stay that way, as not only did ESU take the lead back, but in the second half, they were looking to build on it as they got across for another touchdown to make it a 2-possession game. It wouldn't be till the end of the third quarter where this Mustang offense would start showing some signs of life, and the Mustangs would eventually get another stop on defense, this time forcing a punt. And it led to this first down and 10 where Kenny Bates was getting wide open over the top, and he came up with a huge reception downfield that would finally bring his team across the goal line for a score that was taking the lead. Out of nowhere, this game seemed like it was going in the Mustangs' favor, and that seemed to be pretty clear to everybody in the stadium as on this third down and 14, Joe Kane is getting sacked, ultimately leading to the second down and 9 where the Mustangs got the ball back, and after Leon finds a guy wide open towards the right side for another touchdown to make this a 2-possession game, the Mustangs had completed the second half comeback to put this game away. The Mustangs go on to win this game 43-26, in another game where Willie Weathers leads the way with 4 touchdowns and over 80 yards rushing. Definitely got to shout out Junior Pailata though with over 100 yards receiving on the game. But now that the Mustangs are officially 10-1, they'll be on their way to the playoffs as long as they win their last game of the season against Fitchburg State Prison. Now this game has started out great as Junior Pailata gets across the goal line for a touchdown, making it 7-0. And it actually turned out that that was the bulk of the scoring needed in this game, as even with the Mustangs often struggling greatly throughout the entirety of the second half, ultimately all they needed was an extra field goal in this first down on 3rd and 4 that would effectively put an end to this game, as the Mustangs would go on to finish their season off with a 10-7 victory. And the entire team was happy as they finally had closed out their season and made it to the playoffs, at least until a gang member from the same gang as Willie Weathers had spotted Calvin Owens. He walked right up to him trying to cause a problem, and he ended up shooting Calvin Owens right in the chest. Now luckily that man was taken down by police, and Willie Weathers was determined to be right there by his boy Calvin's side. Now unfortunately for a little bit, it looked like the Mustangs were going to have to forfeit the playoffs, but Sean Porter, being the good coach that he was, found a way to get around it. And Willie Weathers still upset by what happened to Calvin, well it's safe to say he wasn't taking disrespect from anybody. Now going into the bye week, Willie would have some time to cool off, and now that the season is over, it's actually time to give out some awards, as a quarterback from Miami is winning the trophy for the best player of the year. But Willie Weathers would go on to win the best running back in the entire country, going for over 750 yards and 21 touchdowns on the season so far. Miguel Perez would actually go on to win best defensive back, and they actually had a linebacker not named Calvin go on to win best linebacker. But as happy as some of the players were about the awards, there was nothing more important than trying to make it all the way through the playoffs. And after finally now making it there, these boys were hyped, because after a lifetime of being losers, this was now finally going to be their chance to prove that they were winners. And I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, in their first playoff game, they had no problem showing that. These boys were up 31-7 in the fourth quarter, and they were still just moving the ball however and whenever they wanted to. Leon Hayes was finding a receiver wide open down the right side of the field, and the whole stadium knew that this was enough to put an end to this game, as the Mustangs would go on to blow out their opponent 45-10. And Leon Hayes had led the way the entire day with over 250 yards passing and 5 touchdowns. But you see, things were not always going to be so easy for the Mustangs, because in their next game they're facing off against one of the best teams that they have seen all season. A team that is actually home to one of the top prisons in the entire world. So in order for the Mustangs to get to the championship game, they're going to have to take down the state penitentiary. Now things were not looking good for the Mustangs as State Penn got down to the goal line, but Calvin Owens' replacement was coming up with a pick, a huge play deep in the Mustang territory, and he was actually able to flip the field completely, taking his ball way past midfield deep into opposing territory, giving the Mustang offense a great chance to score, and even though it took until 4th down, they eventually would, as Willie Weathers gets across for a touchdown to put this game at 7-0 early on. And things were going well for the Mustangs as they got the ball back and were driving back down the field. But Leon Hayes would ruin all the momentum as he throws an interception to take some points off the board. And in a half where the state penitentiary was actually making some big plays on the Mustangs had realized just how much trouble they might be in. Luckily, there were times like in this game where someone would say shablaka, coming up with a huge hit that forces a fumble, creating a turnover for the Mustangs. A very lucky play that allows Kilpatrick to get the ball back, and Willie Weathers is making the most of it, as he is just gliding his way downfield and leading his team in scoring position. And a few plays later, Leon Hayes was taking it upon himself to get across the goal line for another touchdown on the season. But by the end of the half, the state penitentiary was making their way towards the end zone for a touchdown. And with the way that the state penitentiary had moved up and down the field all game, the Mustangs were not too confident about what could potentially happen in the second half. But at some point, man, Willie Weathers had stepped up and become the leader that Sean Porter knew that he could potentially be.
They ain't that good, man. But better. And it means much more to us.
Man, these boys were hyped up in the locker room, and Coach Porter knew that they were ready to go out in the game. But after allowing a score that tied this game up at 14, to start the second half, Leon Hayes was also throwing a pick. So definitely not the way that the Mustangs wanted to start the half, but things would get even worse after they let up a touchdown. So now out of nowhere, the Mustangs were down by 7 in this game, but Junior Pilata was trying to find a way to change that. And after this first down and 10 where Leon Hayes drops back the pass and delivers a dime over the top to Kenny Bates, the Mustangs were able to get themselves right back in this game. Now they did get a little greedy trying to go for 2 points and they actually got stopped. But it was all good though because they came out on defense, and on this third down and 7 they also came up with the stop. So now the Mustangs just had to get one more score in order to take the lead, and this pass from Leon Hayes was definitely helping, as he hits Kenny Bates with a shot deep over the top, and Kenny Bates was taking this one the distance for a touchdown to take the lead. A huge play that puts the Mustangs up by 5, and Junior Pilata was taking his hand off to put them back up by 7. And now with less than 2 minutes left, all the Mustangs had to do was just come up with a stop on this drive to send them to the national championship. But with the state penitentiary driving, it was not looking good for them. At least until Kevin Owens' replacement said, "Wang!" Coming up with an interception that ignites not just the crowd, but the entire sideline. As after a year of putting in tons of hard work, these young men are finally starting to see that it does in fact pay off. And just like that, Coach Sean Porter had led his team of young criminals to a championship. These boys were hyped as ever, man, and you know what? They should be. They beat the state penitentiary 28-21. And for one of the first times in their life, every single player on the field felt like they accomplished something incredible. And at this point, they all realized that they all had the ability to be a winner. The entire team had played incredibly well this game in order to get this job done. But Kenny Bates was getting a lot of the attention as 2 of his 3 receptions went for touchdowns, big ones that helped his team come away with a victory. But now the Mustangs were looking to come away with the biggest victory of their lives, as in the championship game they were about to face off against the team that they had already beat. But this time they won't be facing off against a group of drunk old men, but rather a team that's focused on trying to win their 2nd straight championship. Now early on it becomes very clear that the Mean Machine actually mean business. Because on the very first play Paul Reck and crew is finding star wide receiver Deacon Moss, there was nobody going to catch him on his way to the end zone for an 88-yard touchdown. So definitely not the start that the Mustangs expected, but they didn't expect to be playing against no Deacon Moss. And when they got on offense, they did not expect for this Mean Machine offense to be playing so crazy. Them boys were just continuously getting stopped on third down. Now on the bright side, they were also able to do the same thing to the Mean Machine. But throughout the entire first quarter, Leon Hayes was being tormented, and this Mustang offense went pretty much nowhere. And then it wouldn't take long into the second quarter where Paul Crew would find another man wide open over the middle, and now he was taking it the distance. Just like that, the Mean Machine were on their way to the end zone to make this a 14-0 ball game. But the way that the Mustangs had battled all season, they were not about to sit up here and go out like no punk. So on the next drive, Willie Weathers was coming up with a big play to get his team in scoring position. Unfortunately though, Leon Hayes would drop back and throw another pick on his season. Picked off by Brucey of all people, who switched over to cornerback. And now things were beginning to get a little worse for the Mustangs as Earl Mega takes his ball to the left side, and out of nowhere this man is gone, taking it the distance for a 92-yard touchdown. And just like that, it was 21-0 for the Mean Machine. It wouldn't be till the end of the second quarter where the Mustangs would finally get across the goal line, getting in for a score that would start to bring them back in this game. Or at least that's what they thought would happen, because after halftime, Leon Hayes was back to throwing another interception. And even though the Mustang defense was actually playing pretty well in holding the Mean Machine to third downs, Paul Crew would still find a way to come up with a big play, as he made a throw where his receiver got into the end zone for another touchdown, making this now 28-7. And right when the Mustangs think that it can't get any worse, they call a simple screen pass and it still gets picked off. This time it's taken all the way back to the crib to make it now 35-7. And all Willie Weathers can do is just watch, as he knows this game might be already out of reach. But it really just continued into the next drive as Leon was sacked for a fumble, and it was picked up by the defense and brought back inside the 5-yard line. That man Big Tony was coming up with a huge play that would demolish Leon Hayes, ultimately leading to this play. Well, Paul Crew had taken his read option to the left side and got across the goal line for another touchdown on the game, doing enough to not only win another championship for the Mean Machine, but put a sad ending to the season for the Kilpatrick Mustang. The Mean Machine go on to win their back-to-back national championship 42-7. But as much as this loss did hurt for the Gridiron Gang, it was nowhere near as bad as the first loss of the season. Because at this point, everybody on this team had accomplished more than they ever thought that they could. And after a year where all of these young men had done a whole lot of winning, they knew that nobody truthfully could ever call them a loser, ever again. Now looking at the season stats, it was hard not to be proud of everybody. Leon Hayes had passed for over 4,000 yards, and Willie Weathers had rushed for over 900 yards and 23 touchdowns. On top of that, he had almost 600 yards receiving, and Kenny Bates had also almost had 1,000 yards as well. Now on defense, pretty much everybody played well, but it was led by Miguel Perez, and Calvin Owens had also done his thing all season. And after a year where Coach Sean Porter had thought that many of these kids might end up back in jail or maybe even dead, he felt great about what he was able to accomplish, but he felt even better about the growth and maturity of a lot of the players throughout the year. And he's looking forward to going into another season where he could help another team get back to another national championship. So this was the story of the Gridiron Gang. If you want to see more videos like this, be sure to get this one to 1,000 likes and subscribe to the channel down below. Also be sure to comment down below what else you guys want to see next, and check out some of these other stories until the next one comes out. If you got to the point in this video, just know that I seriously appreciate you more than you'll ever know. I really put a lot of work into these videos, so I honestly hope you all have an excellent rest of your week. Other than that though, I'm gonna catch you guys next time.